So you're working in Planning Analytics Workspace and you've been asked to contribute to a plan. Now you could just go through and type in the results of what you want, but sometimes you will have a few different ideas in your head of how the data could look, and you potentially want to model those different scenarios and then decide which one is best for you before committing it. Now there is a functionality called Sandboxes that allows us to do just that. So if I am in one of my views, up in the top in the context toolbar, we see the word base. Now this indicates that we are currently working in the base data of the application. This is the data that everyone has visibility of. But what I can do is if I click in there and select Create Sandbox, and I'll call it my sandbox, so you can give it any name you want. So I've got an option here that says create sandbox from. At the moment, base is my only option, so I'll create that. But if I was to go in there and create another sandbox, I could now use my first sandbox as the base for it. And this allows us to start making changes on top of other changes. But in here, after I've got my first sandbox created, I can flip between base and sandbox. But while I'm in my sandbox, I can start changing data just as I usually would. So I can come in here and start typing in some of the cells. So let's go to a consolidation and let's just do some data spreading on it. Do the same in this one here. So we see the slight difference from usual is that the data I've changed has turned into a blue font. So that indicates to me which data I have changed from the base and which data I have not changed. What you may also see, so you have not taken a full copy of the database. All you are doing is overlaying some changes. So the cells you change will always be what you have changed. So if someone now went into the base data and updated one of the same cells I have changed, I still see my change in the sandbox. But if someone went in and changed one of these other cells in the base, one of the cells that I have not changed, I will see their data entry. So you are seeing a current view of the data with your changes overlaying that. But I can flip back to the base version now, and we see the data without my changes. And the good thing about this sort of blue formatting that we see here is if I go to another screen, and this is another cube that is using that data as one of its source inputs in part of the calculation, I see we also get the blue cells in here. So any cell that is changed as a result of data entry I do in my sandbox will also see this blue formatting. So it's a good way of you being able to trace dependencies and find out what changes and what ability you have to change the model based on seemingly simple data entry. But here I have all of my changes, and I could just tick this commit action button. And if I click in there, it allows me to commit the changes I've made back to the base data, and then it will be visible for everyone instead of it just being in my private sandbox. But what I want to do first is decide whether the changes I've made are useful or not. So first of all, I know I've only changed FY21, so I'm going to just keep that year just to tidy this view up a little bit. But then I'm going to click my down arrow to show the overview section. And in here, if I click the three dots in the top right corner, we see the sandbox dimension. Now, if that sandbox dimension is not visible in there for you, it means that the administrators or developers for your model have not enabled a certain configuration setting. Now, at this point, I would just ask them to set it, because as far as I'm aware, the configuration setting doesn't seem to have any negatives and downsides to performance or anything like that. It just allows us to do what we are about to do. So what I'll do is I'll drag that dimension in next to my columns, and then I'm going to go into it, and I'm going to bring the base over in addition to my sandbox. And now I can see my sandbox data and the original base data next to it. And this is where I can then start doing the ad hoc calculations on top of that. So I can see variances, And if I was so inclined, I could also create another calculation to see the variance percentage. So you can start doing that sort of analysis that allows you to view how good your sandbox is. And of course, if I created extra sandboxes, I could also have those in this view. So all of a sudden we can do all the different comparisons we want. There's no real limit on how many sandboxes you can set up. Personally, I wouldn't set up too many of them. It starts getting confusing after a while. But there is this way for you to do that true sort of what if scenario modeling. And it allows you to make some more informed choices before you commit data to your plan. And of course, you don't ever have to commit them. So if you want, you can just do this to answer some questions. You can keep that information in the back of your mind. If you know there are potential things happening in the business and you want to prepare for them in advance, you can have all of these set up, and if the time comes, you can commit that back. Now, if you use these a lot, eventually this list will start getting bigger and bigger, and you will get to a point where you probably have some sandboxes in there that you're not using anymore. So you can always come in and delete sandboxes as well. And if you have made lots of changes in one, you can just press this sandbox discard button. When we do that, we still have our sandbox, but it discards the changes that we made. So it sets it back to being the same as the base. So if you didn't want to delete your sandbox, if you wanted to keep the name but use it for something else, you can press that instead.